You have a seat. So when I was growing up, I had some friends that found some books. And every once in a while, these books would make it into the hands of my teachers. And my teachers put these books to work. And it were just some of my favorite moments. And so I wanted to share a couple of these, just a little favorite moments with you. At the 9, it's a much smaller gathering. It's probably, a fourth of what's in the room today. And then, of course, at 11, we broadcast. So, hey to y'all who are watching online, who are hanging out on the YouTubes and the Facebooks. And so at the 9, it's a little easier for me to have some conversation. So, but either way, in person, I'm still going to ask for you to kind of raise your hand or at least give me some vocal like feedback. For those of you who are online, drop your comment in the comments. Just typically one word will be just fine. And here it is. Here's the game we want to play. Now, here's the deal. I don't want any of you being too cool for school, like, oh, we're going to play a stinking game. Yes, we're going to play a game, and you're going to like it, and you're going to love it, and you're going to smile the whole time. It's called Would You Rather. Anyone ever play that game? Hey, all right, we got 3 people in the front row. That's what I'm talking about. Y'all have to sit on the front row every week. Okay, this is great. Here we go. First one. Would you rather eat with a fork or a spoon for the rest of your life? Now, here's the deal. 1 second before you answer. I don't need any smart people here thinking, oh, well, if we go this way, I've got some other. You get no other utensils. There is no such thing that you can use to put food in your mouth other than a fork or a spoon. Nothing else. And so if you're trying to think here, I'm just trying. So earlier someone said, how about a ladle? Does that qualify as a spoon? Here, you know what I'm talking about when you go over to your friend's house and they make steak, but they don't know how to cook steak, and so they like burn it. You know what I'm talking about? So it's super tough. There's no red left in it. I don't know if any of you eat like leather that way, but that's what's happening. Try cutting one of them steaks with a ladle. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't do it. So it's no knife, just fork or spoon. So if you want to do spoon, rest of your life. Let me see. Any spooners? Oh, okay. A lot of, you're not ashamed. How about the fork people? Where my forkers at? That's what I'm talking about. If you're online, I can't see you, but you can weigh in. That's in the room, way more forkers than spooners. That's what I'm talking about. Number 2, would you rather, this is an important one, would you rather have free Wi-Fi wherever you go or have your favorite free coffee free wherever you go for the rest of your life? So if it's Starbucks, you get it for free, Dunkin' Donuts, or your mama's car, whatever it is. Free Wi-Fi wherever you go or free coffee. So let's go Wi-Fi first. There we go. Coffee people. Okay, so Wi-Fi is bigger. That means all you Wi-Fi people, you're like me and we're on Verizon and we're paying a premium for data. So you're like, you know what? I need some free Wi-Fi. I hear you. Number 3, would you rather be compelled to high five every single person you meet or be compelled to give wedgies to anyone wearing a green shirt? I see a green shirt right there. Right there. Be careful with what's about to happen. I don't know if there's magic in these words, but just be careful. I mean, he looks like he can put up a fight, though, so I'm just warning you. But there's a lot of people in here. Okay, high five people. Okay, that's a lot of folks. Wedgie people? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, I think you can take every one of those things. Every one of them. I saw a bunch of puny hands. You know what I'm saying? No beef was in them. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry if I offended you, puny people. It's fine. Hypothetical choices. Would you rather this or that? Scientists tell us 35,000 choices a day, one or the other. I haven't verified that myself, nor have I counted the choices I make. I just read a number of articles, and that's where they all settled, 35,000. Different decisions a day. What kind of socks are you going to put on? What are you going to eat for breakfast? Are you going to eat breakfast? What time are you going to wake up? How many times are you going to push the snooze? Are you going to put a little bit of toothpaste on, or are you going to brush your teeth at all? Shame on you for not brushing your teeth this morning. Come on. All those decisions that you have to make. Real choices. There's a choice in particular that I want to kind of dive into today. Unfortunately, it's not one of those choices that's kind of comical like fork or spoon. It actually has some real impact in your life. At the end of the day, though, this is what I promise. It really is your choice. And it always has been. And no matter what anyone else tells you, it always will be. Jesus is, in this particular passage that we're going to kind of dive into as we take a look at some of his life, Jesus is in a place where he's gathering some followers pretty close to him. And there's a number of people who have been kind of established in the religious hierarchy, the religious rhythms of the day, that have kind of realized that Jesus is a little different than everyone else that have kind of come before him. This rabbi, son of a carpenter, wasn't supposed to be a rabbi, he was supposed to be a carpenter. And so he starts to show up and he starts to kind of talk about these things that are different than what they have been talking about for a long time. And so there's this particular place in this book called Matthew, and Matthew happens to be one of these close friends of Jesus, that kind of talks specifically about a moment where he actually telling his story of how he jumped in to the life and ministry of Jesus. And he's telling his own story, but there's this, in that Matthew chapter 9, there's these confrontations that happen between Jesus and these established religious personalities. The first one come in the way of scribes. And they're these lawyer-type, teacher-type folks that are super educated. And Jesus makes a comment that he can forgive someone's sins. And as a son of God, if you're a follower of Jesus, then that makes sense, right? That makes sense that he would say that. But for these scribes, they were taking a look at the words of Jesus, and they just like, hey, hold on, this doesn't work. Your rabbi self from a carpenter, like, you don't have the ability to forgive someone's sins, kid. That's what they're telling. Like, you don't know. We are really smart people. We know everything, the ins and outs of the law. There's no room in it for a guy like you to forgive sins. Now, Jesus has a response, but that's not what we want to talk about today. A second time, in the same little section that we're reading in the Bible, there's another group that jumps in. This time, it's the group called the Pharisees. And they're like the clergy, they're like the priests, they're like the folks that are like over the church, if you will. Not really a church, synagogue. This crew, these religious leaders, they jump in, and this time it's not about forgiving sins, but it's who Jesus hangs out with. And Jesus has chosen to spend some time with some folks that are outside of the religious circle, and they would just call them publicly sinners. Oh, you decided to hang out with some sinners. And so they push back against Jesus because of it. I'm like, hey, here's the deal, Jesus. You can't do this. You're a rabbi. You cannot go hang out with these people. If you want to be a rabbi, let us teach you how to behave like a rabbi and who the people you can hang out with. And so they're pushing back against Jesus. Now, Jesus has a response to them, but that's not what we want to talk about today. It's the third group. The third group, and probably one of the most surprising groups that catches Jesus off guard. They're really close friends and followers of a guy named John the Baptist. And John was Jesus' cousin. John had a very specific mission to prepare the way for Jesus. And baptizes Jesus. In fact, he tells the people that are around, he says, hey, behold, this is the Lamb of God who will take away the sin of the world. He talks highly about Jesus, and now suddenly John is in prison for doing the right thing. He just did the right thing to the wrong person, the king, and when you do the right thing to the wrong person, he gets in trouble, and he threw John in jail. So John's in jail, so these followers are out there, and they confront Jesus, and they've got an issue with him. They've got an issue. And so Jesus knows that just this one-line answer, he probably is not changing the scribes and the lawyers' minds, and he's probably not changing the Pharisees' minds. So he decides to put a little more emphasis in this particular answer, where he says, I want to bring some clarity to these followers who at one point were all sold out and bought into who I was, but now they're pushing back against me a little bit. Excuse me. And I want to make sure that I've got an answer for them. So Jesus needs to communicate a really complicated truth. He's going to give an explanation and two analogies in hopes that would convince them this is why he's doing what he's doing. So let's look at Matthew chapter 9, verse 14. This is what he says. Then John's disciples came and asked him, How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? Then John's disciples came and asked him, How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? And so he's looking at him, this crew comes to him and is like, Jesus, here's the deal. I ain't got a problem with you hanging out at this party. I don't have a problem with you hanging out with these people. I don't have a problem because John told us, tell you what I got a problem is that I'm not seeing the people that are following you, following the rituals and customs they're supposed to be following. And it was just kind of tradition. You fasted 2 days a week, Monday, Thursday. They went and they would fast, and that's what they did. And so he looks at his followers and says, hey, the guys that are following you, they should be fasting. Why are they not fasting? We got a problem with it. Now, did you notice that John's followers also, they didn't just say, hey, I've got a problem, Jesus. Will you explain this to me? They say, hey, us and the Pharisees have noticed. So that means there's a conversation that happened between John's followers and the Pharisees about, hey, you see what Jesus' followers are not doing? I wonder, my mind goes, there's no proof for this in the Bible, but my mind wonders if the Pharisees decided, you know what, let's get some other people in on this. And they kind of leaked it to John's followers. Hey, I bet you won't ask him why his followers don't fast. Have you noticed they haven't been fasting? I mean, y'all fast, we fast, they don't fast. And all of a sudden, so one of them decides to say, hey, why ain't y'all fasting? Why aren't you fasting? Now, Jesus has a lot to say about fasting. And if anybody wants to say Jesus doesn't like to fast, Jesus started his ministry fasting for 40 days. So Jesus ain't got a thing against fasting. He's not saying, hey, that's inappropriate. This is not what we're none of that is happening, right? But there's this expectation that twice a week is what we're supposed to be doing. And why are they not doing it? So Jesus is trying to figure out, how am I going to explain this to them? How am I going to give them a little bit of an idea? So this is Jesus' answer. I'm going to read the entire answer and we're going to break it down. Verse 15 says this, Jesus answered, how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. Then they will fast. No one sews a patch of unsunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the new wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. So we want to break it down. Jesus gives an explanation and then gives two analogies, and this is how he answers the question. Let's start with the beginning. Jesus says, how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. Often Jesus is found kind of relating himself as the bridegroom, the church being his bride, and that the bridegroom is present. And so for a Jewish wedding, you'd have this big, ceremony, and then it would have a feast that followed, and there'd be a parade, and at the end of the parade, there's 7 days of just community celebration. And so while the bridegroom is there, while the groom's in the room, you don't mourn or not have a party. If the groom is in the room, you're partying, right? And so he's like, hey, this is the deal. Fasting has a place. And there's a purpose for why we fast. And in fact, there's a really good reason. When we decide that we need to hear directly, when we want to hear from God, and we've got something big in front of us, then we approach God and say, hey, God, I'm gonna empty myself a bit. I'm going to go without so that I'm going to replace not eating, and I'm going to go into a deeper prayer time, or I'm going to go into a deeper just thought time and contemplative time, where I'm just going to focus on what's going on. I'm going to go without, and I'm going to hope that you're going to fill that void with an answer that I'm looking for. Or at worst, a peace that, hey, whatever decision I have in my mind, I can move forward in. And there's a place for that type of fasting. There's a place that even mentions as people are launched into new ministries that it should be done with prayer. When you're having a big decision, there's prayer and fasting. But this ritual of every single week, they're like, hey, I'm looking at you, Jesus, and you're not doing it. And Jesus saying, hey, that's because the groom is in the room. So what are you praying and fasting for? I'm right here. If you need to ask me a question, tap on my shoulder. If you need to hear from God, well, you just come talk to me. I'm here with you right now. There will be a time when I will leave and I will not be here. And in those moments, you'll want to reconnect with me just the way you can connect with me now. And you want to, and fasting will help with that process. 100%. That's a doable thing. Now, you see, fasting, Jesus talks about it a bit. And he warns people, he says, hey, when you begin to do this type of fasting, when you begin to jump into this way of life, you've got to be careful. Because what you don't want is to let everybody know that you're fasting. So if you're saying, hey, I want to hear from God, I want to get into this place where I got this big decision, you don't want to walk around like, man, I'm so hungry, but I am so holy because I'm hungry. You know what I'm saying? Look at me. I'm so hungry and you don't want to do that. He's saying, hey, the grimaces on your face are ruining what you're doing with fasting. You trying to make a show of it is ruining what you're trying to attempt to solve with your fasting. So stop doing it. He's almost just saying, hey, if you're going to go through religious ceremonies just because it's a check-a-box thing, so that people begin to look at you differently or appreciate you more or think that you're better than you are, maybe think that you're holier than you are. If that's your motivation, if that's what you're doing, you should stop. And maybe Jesus is saying that's part of why we're not doing that. He says, why would you begin to mourn or to grieve or to go without when everything you need is right here in front of you? But the truth is, much like most, seldom is the issue. And the real truth is that these three confrontations with Jesus, with the scribes, the Pharisees, and the followers of John, it wasn't what the issue was. Those were just surface issues, and there was a deeper issue underneath all three of them. And Jesus, with his two kind of word pictures, answers the question for all of them. And he answers it for us today. The first one, he says, you don't put new wine in old wineskins. Now, for us in our day, we're like, okay, what in the world are you talking about? I ain't got no wineskin, period. You know what I'm saying? I seen a bottle. I ain't seen no skin. That's fancy. You know what I'm saying? You got to go to like Montana and like go on a hike, and then at the end, you pay a lot of money, and they give you something in a skin. It feels real, but it ain't. You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. In the day, though, this was a normal thing. And so everybody who's listening to him listens to Jesus like, no, he's right. You don't put new wine in old wineskins. And it's because when you're making a batch of new wine and it's time for it to kind of set into ferment, you got to close it off, and you don't want anything else to get into, so you sealed it up. And you go hang it up, and it's got to go through a fermenting process. And then when that happens, gases are released. And if it's an old wineskin, if you've got an old animal hide, typically made of goat in this first century, if you've got an old wineskin, that the gases that are in there are going to expand, and there's no elasticity in something that's old. And so eventually it bursts because it's old, it's cracked, it's no good, and so it seeps through it and just bursts all over the floor. And so if you're making a new batch of wine, you better have a new goat skin to put it in because there's some elasticity with it. So when the gases are released in the fermenting process, it expands with it. And so he's looking at him and saying, hey, if you want the answer to the question underneath the fasting issue, it's this. It's super simple, much simpler than all of you think as he's talking. It's just simple. You all know this. You don't put new wine in old wineskins. And just in case you don't, I'll explain it to you because it'll burst. And then both will be ruined. The wine will be ruined and the skin will be ruined. But you put new wine in new wineskins. Now, just in case that didn't settle in for him, he was like, or maybe some of you are, you're not wine drinkers, okay? So, but all of you wear clothes. And so here's the deal. If you were to have an old cloth, jacket or, shirt that you're wearing and had a big hole in it, then if you were to go get some brand new material that had never been washed before, never been, there's a shrinking that happens when you wash it. At least that's what happens. That's what I keep telling my wife. Why do my clothes keep shrinking, Brooke? You've been washing these things too much. You know what I'm saying? Just leave them dirty, leave them. That's what I'm talking about. But beside that, we're off track. If you got one of them little patches and you put it on an old garment, for instance, let me tell you, I've got this T-shirt that I received in high school, and it's my favorite T-shirt. It's black, and it's got tigers written across it because I went to Stockbridge. Any Stockbridge people in the house? Okay. Anyone online? Okay, all right. Anyway, we were the Tigers in Stockbridge, okay? So, and I got this shirt, and it was my favorite shirt, and I wore it all the time. In fact, I've wore it at every significant moment in our marriage. I wore it in our wedding. I wore it under my tuxedo. I wore it at Emerson's, our son, is his birth. I wore it at Hadley's birth. I've wore it like every big vacation we've gone on to. It's just my favorite shirt. Well, it disappeared. It disappeared about 3 or 4 years ago. Now, it didn't disappear because I'm irresponsible, because I've held on to the shirt since 2000. However many years that was 5 years ago. No, it's 2021. I can do math. 16 years, right? And now all of a sudden, this shirt has gone missing. Now, I'm not frivolous with this shirt. This is completely beside the point. But it had holes in it. And so I told her, hey, we can just patch the holes. And that's what Jesus is trying to say. If you try to patch them holes, what's going to happen? If you put the wrong kind, put the new little cloth on it. Put the new cloth on it. And when you go to wash it, that new cloth's going to shrink. And it's actually going to tear a bigger hole unless you put already old cloth on the old garment. Does that make sense? And so he said, hey, if you drink wine and you understand the wineskins, if you're not, every one of you wear clothes, and every one of you probably experiences this, where you got a hole in something you love, and you tried to patch it, and the patch shrunk, and it made a bigger hole. No matter what, every single person who was listening to him understood exactly what he was saying, except they were completely clueless. They're like, we get what you're saying, but what's this got to do with fasting? Jesus was letting them in on an enormous truth, that he was here to do something new. And you could not take what Jesus was trying to do and put it in or attach it to what already was. So when we kind of take a look at it, Jesus is saying, hey, I don't want to fix what's old. And so that might be offensive to some people. Like, hold on 1 second. You don't actually have to fix it. The Old Testament, like there's nothing to fix there. Like, it's God's word. Well, actually, Jesus actually said, hey, there is an issue with it. It's incomplete. In fact, he says, hey, I'm here to fulfill everything that was there. But if we look into the hardcore piece of what that fulfillment looks like, it's that it was missing something incredibly significant that actually alters what it is altogether. That when Jesus shows up, that's why everyone is completely clueless. They're like, are you kidding me? This is what we've been looking for? We were looking for something completely different. And so Jesus shows up and says, hey, I don't want to just fix the old. I want to do something new. I want to create something new. I want to make you completely new. And in fact, there's one Pharisee that says, hey, he's having a conversation with Jesus. And Jesus is saying, hey, I want to make you new. I want you to be born again. And the Pharisee goes, how can you do that? How could I possibly be born again? Can't you just fix me? Can't you just sew me up a little bit? And Jesus is saying, hey, I could. But making you completely new is better. And that's what I want to chase down with you. I don't want to give you the best version of your perceived self. I actually want to give you the best version of yourself. And I know because I made you, he says. People had an issue with this. They looked at this new rabbi, son of a carpenter, talking all this new gibberish, and they got so frustrated with him, eventually they killed him for it. Because they weren't okay with new. They wanted just to improve the old. We talk about this a lot here at our church, and so I won't spend a ton of time, but I need to hit it before we get into how we apply it. But this kind of summarizes what Jesus was doing and why he ended up losing his life for it. You see, the old had this little deal, and we'll throw this old piece on the screen. The old had this linear movement of, hey, you need to behave, and then after you behave, you can believe, and after you believe, then you'll belong. And so when you were born, you kind of grew up, and your dad or your mom or your granddad, and they're like, hey, this is what we do, son. This is how we act as a family, and this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to behave. And you don't believe in the reasons why. You don't believe in Jesus when you're 3 years old, right? When you're learning how to act, you just learn how to act. You learn how to behave because that's what dad said, or that's what mom said, or that's what grandma said, or whoever. And I'm going to behave. Or when someone comes like, hey, this is how we act in church. I know you ain't never been to church before, but this is how we act. And we don't act how you thinking you want to act. We act like this. You fold your hands, you cross your legs, and you pay attention. You try not to sleep. Like that's what we tell people, right? That's how we behave. Or I can't tell you how many people, I'll be out doing something. Used to be it'd be on the golf course. I never get to play golf anymore. So let's go play golf, somebody. Come on Fridays in the morning. Let's do it. If you can do that, let's be friends. You know what I'm saying? Fridays in the morning. Anyway, it'd be on the golf course, and I'd be out there with some guys, and man, they'd be letting it fly, blah, blah, all these kind of things. Words are just going. And now all of a sudden, they're like, so what do you do? And I'm like, man, should I tell them? I don't want to lie to him. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm a pastor at a church, and they'll be like, and behavior changes. All of a sudden, it's not what they believe or anything else. Like, you know what? I'm going to change my behavior right now. And suddenly it's like, oh, well, you know what? My pastor had a really good message last Sunday. What was it? Like, where you go to church? Oh, shoot, what's the name of that church? Like, oh, why is he asking me this question? You know what I'm saying? Like, man, okay. But that's it. That's our culture. You've got to behave a certain way. And then hopefully that behavior keeps you around long enough till you start believing that this is why I should behave this way. And eventually, if you can get the behavior right and you can get the belief right, then you can belong to who we are. And Jesus shows up in Matthew chapter 9 and says, they don't behave like us, they don't believe like us, but they belong to me. And every single person looking at Jesus says, that's not the way we do things. They haven't earned the right to have a rabbi at their house for dinner. They don't behave the way they're supposed to. You can't go to dinner at their house. They don't even. We even talk. This is played out in the story of Jesus and the story of the church. There's this a moment when they say, "Hey, why do we have expectations on people who don't follow Jesus to act like they follow Jesus? Like, why would we think that someone who doesn't believe Jesus is who he says he is, that they would align themselves morally or even just from a behavior standpoint with anything Jesus said? It just doesn't make sense. It's like, so stop putting that expectation on people. Jesus shows up and he flips it. He says, hey, you can belong, and it's my hope that your belonging will introduce you to the truth and you'll believe. And then your behavior will be the very last thing that changes. Because at the end of the day, if you change your behavior before you believe, then you're just faking it. But if your behavior changes and the way you orient your life and the things that you participate in or choose not to participate in, if it's because of strongly held beliefs, then all of a sudden that's genuine. He's saying, don't fast Mondays and Thursdays because that's what we're supposed to do. He's saying, if you're going to fast, there's a way to do it. And don't do it to where it gets pity from everybody else, but do it in a way that people don't even have any idea that you're doing it. Have the right reasons behind it. And Jesus is introducing them a completely new way to think about it. Well, let's just take it super practical, right? Let's pretend that me and, I don't know, Shane. So Shane, raise your hand so everybody can see. So let's just say me and Shane are on opposite sides politically. That he's on one political. I know we just talking about politics, y'all. I know it's hot in here. It's about to get hotter. So Shane is right there, and we are on opposite sides politically. Let's just pretend that. No, I'm not going to say which side was which. We're just going to say, hey, he's on one side, completely opposite, right? And let's say for a second, that I know that he's not a follower of Jesus, and I'm a follower of Jesus. But I have a hardcore political ideology. I really do believe what I believe in terms of politics. And I see that Shane is super vocal about what he believes in politics. Crazy vocal. Almost like obnoxious meme vocal. You know what I'm talking about? And that's just where he's at. So I've got a decision to make. If I want to have a relationship with Shane, then if I want to do it Jesus' way, I've got to say, hey, you can belong in my friend circle, even though you are obnoxiously different in terms of politics than I am. But I've got to figure out a way. It's on me to figure out a way how to make sure that you feel like you belong with me, even though we are complete opposites on everything our community wants to talk about, everything all those things that we are, and you're so vocal about it. I've got to figure out a way for you to belong here with me in my little thing. And it's on me because I'm the Christ follower, right? And then it's my hope that you eventually give your life to Jesus and you begin to believe. And then your behavior begins to change, right? So the rest of the world would say, no. I need his behavior to change. I need him not to be so obnoxious. And I need his beliefs to change because his beliefs don't line up with what I think Jesus does. And then you and I can be friends. Now, here's the deal. This is how we know for sure this is the practice. Let's pretend for a second he and I are aligned politically 100% on the exact same thing, and he's not a Jesus follower, and I am. I have no issue then inviting him into my world to say, hey, come on, dude, I got a place for you. The only thing separating us is Jesus. And all of a sudden, though, we've allowed politics or whatever, fill in the blank, to come between people where say, hey, I can't even enter into a conversation with him because he's so obnoxious. I don't care where he's at spiritually. I can't deal with the political obnoxiousness. And that's why Jesus is showing up saying, hey, I know you've got an old way of doing things, and you're welcome to continue to do that. It's your choice. But I have a new way of doing things. And my way, we sang about it, is the very first thing you'll seek is the kingdom of God. First. Not 1B, 1A, first. And I get it. It makes it difficult. It makes it complicated. I can't tell you how many emails or Facebook messages or Instagram messages or DMs or inbox, whatever you want to call it, we get week in and week out. It says, hey, tell us your stance on this. As a church, where do you line up? We're here. As a church, what do you think about this? As a church, what do you think about this? As a church, as if they're saying, if you don't line up with what I need you to believe, even if I don't believe in Jesus, I cannot enter into a relationship with you. And my response is, hey, here's the deal. Let's get together. Let's talk about it. Let's get together and talk about it, because here's the deal. Even if you wholeheartedly disagree with me or what our church believes, I promise you, I will work my tail off for you to have a place to belong. I do not care what you believe, and I do not care today how you behave. But I care wholeheartedly that you have a place with us. It's one of the most difficult things to do in life. It requires us to pick and choose the moments we're vocal. It requires us to be strategic about the conversations we have. It requires us to build an equity in relationship that allows us to have a hard conversation from time to time. But it's the Jesus way. So when we take a look at how we apply this specifically to us beyond just relationships with people who disagree with us, the question becomes, how does the new Jesus fit into an old way? Well, Jesus is saying, I don't. Well, actually, Jesus is not saying he doesn't. He's saying, I for sure fit into your old way. But the problem is I'm going to tear it up. If you put new Jesus into old wineskins, it's going to burst. If you put new Jesus on the old cloth, I'm going to tear a bigger hole. In other words, when I take a look at this, we're kind of saying, hey, you know what, Jesus, I got a good thing going here, and I have recognized that you are pretty special. So what I would like for you to do is come along with me on this pretty good thing I got going here, journey, and help me out a little bit. That's what I like to call the tag-along Jesus. Jesus, come on, man. Have you seen my life? Have you seen what I put together? It'd be great to add you to it. Come on. Are you in? You in? Here's the deal. A tag-along Jesus will turn into a tear stuff up Jesus. Every day. And what's going to happen is you're going to be upset at the church, or you're going to be upset at Jesus. What's going to happen is Jesus saying, hey, here's the deal. I want you to invite me into your life, but I don't want to tag along. I want to lead it. I want to sit in the driver's seat. I don't want to sit in the back seat. I actually want to lead the thing. And you're saying, no, I just want you to tag along. I got this old wineskin over here, this old piece of life. And what I want to do is I realize I trust you, Jesus. I can't put a bunch of you in there because you'll blow the whole thing up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a little bit of Jesus in this little thing over here that I know is the old way of me doing things. And I'm going to say, you know what? I would like a little bit of Jesus over there, but I don't want him to blow the whole thing up. So I'm going to put a little bit, and I'm going to take it along with me. And then all of a sudden, what Jesus says is going to happen happens. And the whole thing, it makes a mess all over the floor. And you look, and things fall apart in your life. And all of a sudden, like, man, Jesus, why didn't you fix this? I had you tagging along with me, but now I got a mess on the floor. And Jesus is like, I told you not to put me in there. I told you that I can't be a tag-along Jesus, that I tear stuff up when I'm a tag-along Jesus. And now you're mad at me, and you're mad at the church, and you're mad at everybody else. Now, there's a huge difference in the mentality of this. Let me have a tag-along Jesus. Let me put a little Jesus in my old way of life and just see what happens. Oh, it'll be fine. He ain't as bad as he thinks he is. That's one way of approaching it. And the other one, the one that God can actually work with is, hey, Jesus, here's the deal. I got this old piece of life right here, and I cannot figure out how to let it go over there. I know you want me to. I know you need me. I know for sure that this does not fit in my new way of Jesus thinking, but I cannot figure out how to let it go. Jesus can work with that. But when you try to sprinkle Jesus in something, you like, nah, I ain't going to let that go. That's when it makes a mess. That's when it makes a mess. You might be wondering, what are these things? Well, there's a list. It could be the way we're involved in relationships, the intimate pieces of those relationships, and whether that's God-honoring or not God-honoring. We say, I want Jesus to be a part of the relationship, but I'm not really ready to let Jesus have every piece of this. It takes a little bit of old wine skin, put a little sprinkle of Jesus in there. It could be the way that we unwind, a substance that takes away our ability to stay in control and to remain responsible, where we overdo it and suddenly we've lost an evening. It could be in the way we spend our time or the way we spend our resources. Or we say, I got this old way of doing things, and I'm really cautious about the amount of Jesus I put in it. You see, at the end of the day, Jesus isn't upset with the way that we live when we're just honest with him about it. I got this thing, and I don't know how to let go. Jesus can begin working with that. Where Jesus starts to bull in a china shop is when you try to fake it and put Jesus in a place he doesn't belong. And you're like, nah, I'm just going to make it work. And Jesus is like, yeah, make this work. Watch this. At the end of the day, we don't need a tag-along Jesus. We need a driver's seat Jesus. Jesus in the front, we in the back. Jesus in the front, we're in the back. You know, I'll say this and we'll close. It's one thing for us to make a decision that, hey, we want to have a front seat Jesus, not a tag-along Jesus. It's one thing for us to make a decision to say, hey, you know what? We want to put new Jesus in new wineskins. We want to get rid of the old because he's doing something new in us. He doesn't want to just fix us. He wants to make us new. That's one piece of it. And then there's a second piece that I want to talk to those of you who have already made some pretty big decisions, already said, hey, I want to be a follower of Jesus. I want to talk specifically to you and about you and your facial expressions just for a second. There's a movie, it's a Batman movie, and Joker's in it, saucy little Joker. And he has this moment, and you probably remember it. I'm going to dumb it down. I'm going to pull it down a little bit for the kiddos in the room because there's a bunch of them here today. There's this place where he's got a weapon, and he's holding it with his other guy in a way that makes this other guy not able to move. And he does move. He's going to get tore up from the floor up. And so he looks at the guy. I don't know if y'all remember the scene. He looks at the guy, and he goes, why so serious? Anybody else knew that? Wasn't that a good Joker? That was really good, wasn't it? No? Okay. All right, so, but you remember it. I think that's what Jesus was trying to say a little bit here. He was trying to look at this new wineskins. He was trying to look at a bunch of followers of Jesus and saying, why do you walk around so serious? Why is it that everybody's got to behave and belong and be just perfect for you to have a good time? Isn't there a joy that's in you? And there's like this new wineskin mentality that ought to bring a smile to your face every once in a while. And we say, well, it's my personality. This is an RBF thing. I got to go on. God wired me this way. Well, no, there's like something more than that, right? It's something beyond that, where Jesus is saying, hey, you know what? Here's the deal. If I can make you new, I can make you aware to some choices that you invite people into your life with the joyous disposition as opposed to walking around always so serious but so holy. Where he says, hey, maybe this fast and these rituals, these religious pieces that you're in, like that's good. Like that's great if it's good for your life. But if it's excluding other people because they look at you and say, there's no way I can get into, there's no way I can belong with somebody like that. They'll never accept me. My life is so much different, and there's just nothing inviting about them. I'm just slowly backing away. And Jesus is saying, hey, would you be the type of people they would be all in on holiness, but 100% about trying the things the new way? Where you said, Jesus, I want people to want to be a part of the faith movement that I'm a part of. I don't want them to look at me and just see serious. But they would look at me and they would say, I bet I could belong with him. I bet I could belong with her. You see, Jesus was asked about fasting, but it really wasn't about fasting. Jesus was letting them in to a completely new way to live. A different approach to the world, a different approach to people, a different approach to religion. And the incredible thing is, he gives you the choice. New or old? New life, old life. New way of doing things with Jesus, old religious ways. The choice is yours. And it always has been, and it always will be. And you get to make it every single day. One of the 35,000 would you rathers. Real life would you rathers. Which one do you want? That choice is yours.